Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. A podcast that talks about human development and psychology to help you understand a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about forming childhood memories. And the different types of memories were generic, episodic, and autobiographical. So generic memory, which begins at about age 2, produces a script. A script is a general, remembered outline of a familiar, repeated event used to guide your behavior. Excuse me. So this is like something you do every day. This is how your day is going to go because this is what happens every day. A general outline of a familiar, repeated event without details of time or place. The script contains routines for situations that come up again and again. It helps the child know what to expect and how to act. So if you have a consistent routine for your child, that helps them to be more secure. They know what to expect and how to act in the given situation. For example, a child may have scripts for riding the bus to preschool or having lunch at grandma's house. They know this is what's going to happen. So this is what they expect to happen. And, it's helpful to them to, know that there's some consistency in their life. Episodic memory refers to an awareness of having experienced a particular incident that occurred at a specific time and place. Young children remember more clearly events that are unique or new to them. 3-year-olds may recall details about a trip to the circus for a year or longer, whereas generic memories of frequent events, such as going to the park, tend to blur together. However, given a young child's limited memory capacity, episodic memories are temporary, unless they recur several times, in which case they are transformed to generic memory. They last for a few weeks or months and then fade. The reliability of children's episodic memory has become an important issue in lawsuits involving charges of child abuse. Because young children want to please their parents or whoever's in charge. And so children don't always remember things right. And if pressed by an adult, they will change their story because they want to give the adult what they think they want to hear. So, young children should never be put on the stand in a lawsuit. Autobiographical memory refers to memories that form a person's life history. These memories are specific and long-lasting. Although autobiographical memory is a type of episodic memory, not everything in episodic memory becomes part of long-term memory. Only those memories that have a special personal meaning to the child. So usually, a traumatic or unique memory will be kept because it's not a day-to-day routine thing that happened. It stood out amongst the things that happened to a child, so it became part of, the long-term memory. And that's why psychologists say our first memories are usually traumatic ones, Influences on autobiographical memory. Why do some early memories last longer than others? One factor, as we've already noted, is the uniqueness of the event. So children's active participation either in the event itself or its retelling or reenactment and parents' way of talking with children about past events. So the more a child thinks about this thing, the more likely it's going to be saved, in the autobiographical memory. And that's why, anything that was unique or traumatic is usually something you dwell on, and so it gets stored, in your long-term memory. Intelligence, psychometric, and Vygotskian approaches. One factor that may affect how early children develop both language and memory is intelligence. Let's look at two ways intelligence is measured in early childhood: through traditional psychometric tests and through newer tests of cognitive potential. Then we'll consider some influences on children's performance. Traditional psychometric measures. Because 3, 4, and 5-year-olds are more proficient with language than younger children, intelligence tests can now include more verbal items. And these tests, if well standardized, produce more reliable results than the largely nonverbal tests used in infancy. As children approach age 5, there's a higher correlation between their scores on intelligence tests and the scores they will achieve later. The Stanford-Binet intelligence scale takes 30 to 40 minutes. The child's asked to define words, string beads, build with blocks, identify the missing part of a picture, trace mazes, and then show an understanding of numbers. The child's score is supposed to measure memory, spatial orientation, and practical judgment in real-life situations. The 4th edition, revised in 1985, includes an equal balance of verbal and nonverbal, quantitative, and memory items. Instead of providing the IQ as a single overall measure of intelligence, the revised version assesses patterns and levels of cognitive development. The Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence revised. An hour-long individual test used with children ages 3 to 7 yields separate verbal and performance scores as well as combined scores. Its separate scales are similar to those in the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for children. Discussed later on, the 89 revision includes new subtests and new picture items. Both the Stanford-Binet and the WPPSIR have been re-standardized as a sample of children representing the population of preschool-age children in the United States. Influences on measured intelligence. At one time, it was believed that the family environment played a major role in cognitive development. Now, the extent of that influence is in question. We don't know how much of parents' influence on intelligence comes from their genetic contribution, and how much from the fact that they provide a child's earliest environment for learning, because you do. You provide the child's earliest environment for learning. So it's your responsibility to do those things with them, to teach them things, to have constructive play, to work puzzles, things that are going to help them to be a more intelligent person. Testing on teaching based on Vygotsky's theory. According to Vygotsky, intelligence grows with the interaction between child and environment, and assessments should seek to capture and guide this ongoing process. Dynamic testing, based on the concept of the zone of proximal development, introduced in Chapter 2, offers an alternative to traditional static tests that measure a child's ability at a given moment. Unlike static tests, dynamic tests measure potential abilities by giving the child leading questions, examples, and demonstrations that may help the child master a task. And see, you thought we were really far into this. Oh, God, you got like 5,000 hours to go. Early childhood education. Going to preschool is an important step, widening a child's physical, cognitive, and social environment. Today, more 4-year-olds than ever, and even many 3-year-olds, are enrolled in early childhood education. The transition to kindergartners, the beginning of real school, is another momentous step. Goals and types of preschools across cultural view. In some countries, such as China, preschools are expected to provide academic preparation for schooling. In contrast, most preschools in the United States and many other Western countries traditionally have followed a child-centered, philosophy stressing social and emotional growth in line with young children's developmental needs. Though some, such as those based on the theories of Piaget or the Italian educator Maria Montessori, have a stronger cognitive emphasis. As part of a debate over how to improve education, pressures have grown to offer instruction in basic academic skills in U.S. preschools. Defenders of the traditional developmental approach maintain that academically oriented programs neglect young children's need for exploration and free play, and that too much teacher-initiated instruction may stifle their interest and interfere with self-initiated learning. And I'm a big believer in the Montessori. I think the children should be oriented because where you like is the place you're going to learn more and become more proficient at. So, my belief is not that we're all going to be great, well-rounded people. We're not all capable of it. Just, putting that out there. Compensatory preschool programs. Estimates are that more than 2/3 of children in poor urban areas enter school poorly prepared to learn. Large-scale programs have been developed to help such children compensate for what they have missed and to prepare them for school. Because if mom or dad are too busy working 3 or 4 jobs or whatever, and they're being handed off to grandma who might think them helping and doing chores is more important than learning anything, they may not have learned anything. They might not have ever drawn or know their alphabet or count very high, so their disadvantaged children are actually at a disadvantage when they start school. The transition to kindergarten. Originally a year of transition between the relative freedom of home or preschool and the structure of real school, kindergarten is now more like first grade. Children spend less time on self-chosen activities and more time on worksheets and preparing to read. Many kindergartners now spend a full day in school rather than the traditional half day. And, as academic and emotional pressures mount, many parents hold children back a year so that they now start kindergarten at age 6. Because a lot of kids are not mature enough at age 5 to go the whole day at school. And the half day was better. I went for a half day when I went to kindergarten. My brother didn't go. My sister did go, and she went the half day. And for a child who's just coming out of toddlerhood, that's actually a better transition before they get to first grade and, big kid school. So, that's just a fact there is that some kids are just not there yet, Let me skip ahead. That's nothing to do with nothing. All right, the developing self. Who in the world am I? Ah, that's the great puzzle, said Alice in Wonderland, after her size had already changed. Again, solving Alice's puzzle is a lifelong process of getting to know oneself. And this is where now we're going to start digging in a little harder. Because that is the question, who am I? And you have to be able to answer that question if you want to have a fulfilling, happy life. Because in order to meet your needs as a person, you have to know who you are first. So that is a big step in life to figure out who you are. The self-concept and cognitive development. The self-concept is our total image of ourselves. It is what we believe about who we are, our total picture of our abilities and traits. It is a cognitive construction, a system of descriptive and evaluative representations about the self, which determines how we feel about ourselves and guides our actions. The sense of self also has a social aspect. Children incorporate into their self-image their growing understanding of how others see them. And this is a place where we get cognitive dissonance sometimes, because we see ourselves in a certain way, but other people see through their own lens, and they might color their opinion, and they see you a different way. And then when they approach you in that way or say something to you that you are this way, it can be a shock to you because, like, no, I'm not. I'm this way. This is how I believe. Why do you think I'm like that? Why would you think I'm like that? So this is where, problems come in, and it happens at first usually in school when other kids, and there's going to be miserable people who always want to make others miserable, and mean kids who pick on other kids. And that's why I'm actually a big believer in homeschooling, or in a school system where, other kids are not allowed to say mean things to other kids, and that's hard because that's just part of our lives. That's where we first see that, is, when we go to school. And then it might happen with neighborhood friends, and then it might happen when you go to work. But again, you need to know yourself. You need to know who you are, because then when other people put disparagements on you and say you're like this or whatever, you're just like, whatever, no, I'm not. You don't know me. And move on with your life. Because especially in preteen and teenage years, when other people do this to you, it can affect you greatly. Because you want to fit in so badly when you're this age that when other people do this to you, it feels like the end of your world, and there have been people who have been bullied to the point where they commit suicide. And that's a dang shame. That should never happen. But in this day and age, it does. So coming up with your own self-concept, deciding who you are, will actually help you have the self-esteem to not listen when other people tell you you're a different way. And that's important. How does the self-concept change in early childhood? By age 4, Jason's attempts at self-definition are becoming more comprehensive as he begins to identify a cluster of characteristics to describe himself. This is one of the things I thought was kind of funny about this book. It's like they don't give you any backstory or whatever. They just put a random kid's name, and you're like, who is Jason? Are we talking about the guy from the horror movie? Because, Halloween's coming, and is this what happened? Is this his problem? During the past 25 years, researchers have become interested in pinpointing the intermediate changes that make up this age 5 to 7 shift. An analysis based on non-Piagetian theory describes the 5 to 7 shift as occurring in 3 steps, which actually form a continuous progression. At 4, Jason is at the first step. His statements about himself are single representations, isolated, one-dimensional items. His thinking jumps from particular to particular, without logical connections. At this stage, he cannot imagine having 2 emotions at once. You can't be happy and scared. He cannot decenter, in part because of his limited working memory capacity. And so he cannot consider different aspects of himself at the same time. His thinking is all or nothing. He cannot acknowledge that his real self, the person he actually is not the same as his ideal self, the person he would like to be. So he describes himself as a paragon of virtue and ability. And we learn as we go along that our real self is flawed. We are who we are. We make mistakes. We have, feelings that are not so gracious. And our ideal self is who we hope to be someday. And Jesus said, you're not perfect. No, not one of you. But, we're trying to perfect ourselves. So, you can accept your real self and work towards your ideal self on a daily basis. At about age 5 or 6, Jason moves up to the second step as he begins to link one aspect of himself to another. I can run fast, and I can climb high. I'm also strong. I can throw a ball real far. I'm going to be on a team someday. However, these representational mappings, logical connections between parts of his image of himself, are still expressed in completely positive, all or nothing terms. Since good and bad are opposites, he cannot see how he might be good at some things and not at others. Because they, at that age, still haven't gone beyond the egocentric thinking. So they'll get there. They'll get there. Understanding emotions. Understanding their own emotions helps children to guide their behavior in social situations and to talk about feelings. It enables them to control the way they show their feelings and to be sensitive to how others feel. Understanding one's emotions, then, is a cognitive process that can lead to action. Because, if you understand your emotions, you can act on them or not. In some cases, not is the preferred choice, depending on what the emotion is. Emotions directed toward the self. As we have mentioned, emotions directed toward the self, such as guilt, shame, and pride, typically develop by the end of the 3rd year, after children gain self-awareness and accept the standards of behavior their parents have set up. Violating accepted standards can bring shame or guilt, or both. Living up to, or surpassing, standards can bring pride. But even children a few years older often lack the cognitive sophistication to recognize these emotions and what brings them on, a necessary step toward emotional control, because that is the goal there. Some emotions need to be controlled. We all have urges and feelings, but sometimes we need to control our emotions because if not, the world's in chaos and, we have the purge happening and stuff like that. So, that's not our goal in life. Simultaneous emotions. Part of the confusion in younger children's understanding of their feelings is difficulty in recognizing that they can experience different emotional reactions at the same time, as Isabel Allende did toward her grandfather, both resenting and admiring him. So yeah, you can be scared and happy. You can be sad but relieved. You can experience different emotions at different times. And to a kid, that's confusing. They don't understand that because they're all or nothing, egocentric thinking. It's like it's this or that. It can't be both things, They haven't learned to color outside of the lines yet, This is blue, this is red. We can't have purple, It's not something that, they're thinking about at this point. Erikson, initiative versus guilt. The need to deal with conflicting feelings about the self is at the heart of the 3rd stage of personality development, identified by Erikson. Initiative versus guilt. The conflict arises from the growing sense of purpose, which lets a child plan and carry out activities, and the growing pangs of conscience the child may have about such plans. Because children, are all impulsive. But at a certain point, they realize they shouldn't always act on these. So, this stage is about kind of learning to control themselves. Self-esteem. Self-esteem is the self-evaluative part of the self-concept, the judgment children make about their overall worth. From a Neo-Piagetan perspective, self-esteem is based on children's growing cognitive ability to describe and define themselves. And this is where parents need to tread lightly, because everything you say to a child, they're going to internalize. So if you're telling your child that they're bad, that they're stupid, that they're, mean, nasty, whatever, they're internalizing that. So unless that's something that you want your child to be, you should not say that to them, because that's probably coming from your emotional state, not anything the child is doing. Developmental changes in self-esteem. Children do not generally articulate a concept of self-worth until about age 8. But younger children show by their behavior that they have one. Recent attempts to measure young children's self-esteem often incorporate teacher and parent reports, or puppets and doll play, in addition to self-reports. Contingent self-esteem, the helpless pattern. When self-esteem is high, a child is motivated to achieve. However, if self-esteem is contingent on success, children may view failure or criticism as an indictment of their worth, and they may feel helpless to do better. About 1/3 to 1/2 of preschoolers, kindergartners, and first graders show elements of this helpless pattern. Self-denigration or self-blame, negative emotion, lack of persistence, and lowered expectations for themselves. Instead of trying a different way to complete a puzzle, as a child with unconditional self-esteem might do, helpless children feel ashamed and give up, or go back to an easier puzzle they have already done. They do not expect to succeed, and so they do not try. Whereas older children who may fail may conclude that they are dumb, preschoolers interpret poor performance as a sign of being bad. Furthermore, they believe that badness is permanent. This sense of being a bad person may persist into middle childhood and on into adulthood. And isn't that sad? That just because, there's some negative input in this child's life and they fail at things, they consider themselves bad because they can't live up to expectations. So that's something else you have to watch out, is the expectations you put on your child. Because if the child can never live up to them, they're going to feel like they're a failure and they're bad, and it will have nothing to do with how they actually are, but what you have put on them. So, like I said, I feel like everyone should take parenting classes before you have a kid. That's the facts of life, because there are too many people in the world who are messed up because of bad parenting. It's like a psychiatrist I used to work with said, there's no such thing as bad kids, only bad parents. So, gender identity, awareness of one's femaleness or maleness, and all it implies in a particular society, is an important aspect of developing self-concept. As we have seen, Isabel Allende's awareness of what it meant to be a female in a man's world went back to her early years. And dads are worse than moms about this, at assigning a gender. Dads play more with the boys, and they do more boy things than they do with the girls. And so that's something, dads need to work on a little better. Is playing with the girls like, a girl, not trying to make them into a boy, because then that just messes them up. And, we're having kind of a big gender identity revolution going on nowadays. So, just accept your child for what they are. Don't try to put them in this box or that box or a different box that you think you'd like them in. Let them be who they are. Gender differences. Gender differences are psychological or behavioral differences between males and females. How pronounced are the differences? And then it goes on to biological and, psychological and things like that. I'm not going to get into the whole gender identity thing because I'm not teaching a gender identity class. But basically, you're not sure, even if you think you are, about your sexuality until you're a fully sexual being. So anyone who says their young child is this or that or other, you're wrong, because you don't know. You cannot be a sexual being until you are sexually mature. You might have an inkling, you might have a feeling, but like I said, everyone goes through you know, a homosexual type stage where they prefer to be with the same sex and play than the males. You know, the boys and girls got cooties kind of thing. So you don't know until you are a fully sexual being what your sexuality is. And that's just a fact. That is a biological fact. Sorry if you don't like that. And that is where I'll just leave you today. You can dwell on that one if you want. And I hope that this helped you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do.